got to hit the record button first. So, well, it's 9. I told everybody we'd start at 9, and we have Gayla McKenzie, Representative Gayla McKenzie, with us today. And I'll explain what we're trying to do here today on today. I've explained it a little bit to Gayla, so she probably gets to field the questions on everything today. But I had sent a note to our legislators and our legislative delegation this week to talk about some specific bills that don't necessarily get a lot of the press attention. There's a lot of issues out there like hate crimes and other things that are taking up the space when it's reported. But there are other issues that are just as important going on in the legislative session that don't necessarily get the press that they should. And so I sent a note to several of our legislators to talk about some of their specific bills that they're running that are just as important. And a few of them are on the calendar for Monday in the House. And also I wanted to take some time today to talk about a couple of bills that are out there and some of the actions of our local legislators that deserve some credit for things that they did. And we'll talk about those as well too. So I want to thank our sponsors for making this program possible. This is a forum that is hosted by the Bentonville Area Chamber of Commerce, Greater Bentonville Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rogers-Lowell Area Chamber of Commerce. We've been doing this for years, and it's been a good partnership, and it really works to, we do this as a public service, not only for our members, we open it up to the public so everybody has a chance to visit with their legislators. Normally they're in person, which is a lot easier to do it when you're in person than it is to do it on Zoom. So hopefully we'll be, by the time we meet again in a regular legislative forum, we will not have to do this by Zoom. We can be doing it in person. So, but that has presented some issues for us this year, but I do appreciate our legislators that have been able to make it to our meetings. They do the best job that they can and under the circumstances. So it's good to have you here today, Gayla. We're very appreciative for what you do. But I wanted to start with kind of giving a recap of this week. And I mentioned there's a couple of bills that we wanted to highlight some of the actions of our legislators because I think it's important. Sometimes y'all get criticized, Gayla, for, voting the wrong way or doing things, you hear about when you do something wrong more than when you do something right. And so I would like to, take this time to, talk about a couple of bills and the actions, one House member, one senator from the Benton County delegation. There's a very important bill out there that's going to be on the calendar in the House on Monday. And it's Senate Bill 287, and it was sponsored by Senator Hester. But the House sponsor is Clint Penzo from Washington County. It deals with the governor's scholarship funds for students that are graduating from school. And it extended those funds for students that were brought here when they were young, that have met all the requirements to obtain the scholarship and receive the scholarship, but for reasons that they have no control over, they don't qualify for the scholarship. And this bill enables them to qualify for that scholarship. So if you were brought here when you were 2 years old and you were pretty much an American for all intents and purposes and gone through the whole public school system, you should be able to get those scholarship funds. And I just want to commend Senator Hester and Representative Penzo for bringing this bill. It's important because it's on a time deadline. March 1st is the deadline to apply for these scholarship funds. And the Education Department and Higher Ed has made provisions as long as it's on the governor's desk on Monday and he signs it and it has an emergency clause on it, as long as the applications are in by the students by March 1st, the Education and Health and Higher Ed departments have made provisions for those funds to be available to those students. And they'll sort through the application process and see if they qualify. So that's a very important bill because our region, has its own set of issues that they have to deal with the Latino community, kids that were brought here years ago. And this is very important because, so I just want to thank Senator Hester for bringing that bill and Representative Penzo. I think it's a good bill and it should be passed, and I don't see why it won't pass on Monday. And so let's get it on the governor's desk and let's get these kids the funds they need to continue their education. Another one was Senate Bill 289 was presented in the Healthcare Committee this week. We have some issues with the bill because it is overly broad. It's called the Medical Ethics and Diversity Act, which it's written so broadly that it poses problems for healthcare providers because it allows, the way it's written, it allows people that work in the healthcare system or work for the healthcare providers, it doesn't have an accurate definition for conscientious objection to providing healthcare services. This is not a question of whether a doctor doesn't perform abortions or should be asked to perform a procedure they don't agree with. The way it's written, and the state chamber brought these points up among other folks that spoke against the bill. The way it's written, it applies to anybody in the healthcare provider system. So if you have a medical assistant that does not like a certain, if they don't like, just example, they don't like Black people or they don't like gay people, they don't have to conscientiously serve them their lunch or change their bed linens. And it's written that way. And there would be no repercussions from their employer if they express that. So we have asked the sponsors of the bill to entertain some amendments to this bill that would allow a more stricter definition of conscientious objection. And so the bill did not make it out of committee. And one of the reasons it did not make it out of committee because Representative Jim Dotson raised some very valid legal concerns about the bill that the proponents of the bill did not have a good answer for. And so it only received 10 votes. They received 10 votes against it, and they could not, and the proponents could not get to 11 votes, which is what you got to have to get it out of committee. But Senator Dotson raised some very good legal points. And the quote that he used, and I'm paraphrasing, Dougie, you'll have to go back and find his exact quote, but he said, "The time to get this right is right here, instead of waiting on the courts to weigh in on the issue." And that's a very important point that he raised because, sometimes laws are passed that need to have those kind of questions asked or those kind of issues sorted out in the committee process or on the floors of the chambers of the legislature before we throw it over into the courts, which ends up costing the state money and time on issues that should have been more looked at a little harder. Gail, I don't know where you are on that issue, but I just wanted to commend Representative Dotson for basically saying, let's hold up and get this right so we can have a good bill. So please express that to Jim when you see him, that we really appreciate his efforts on the behalf of many healthcare providers around the state that have some serious concerns about that bill. So those are the attaboys that I wanted to give to a couple of our legislators for things they did this week, because I think it's important that questions are raised and people are taken care of in an expedited way if it has to be, because that bill has to be signed by Monday, and they were under the gun to get that done, and Senator Hester did a good job with that. So, But with that, I'll turn to Gayla, who is our guest today as a legislator. And we talked about this a little bit before everybody got on. House Bill 1061, the No Patient Left Alone Act, that's on the calendar for Monday. Gayla, tell us about your bill and what it means for folks, because we are in the middle of COVID and we're starting to come out of it, but there's still a lot of time left before we get on the other side of this. But so tell us a little bit about that bill so go ahead.
Sure. Well, this bill, I would say, and as you mentioned, there are a lot of bills that get a lot of the coverage, and yet there are bills that are actually going to be more impactful for our constituents. This is one of them. I would say I would put this bill in one of the top 5 bills of areas of concern to my constituents that I've heard from for the last year. Folks who've had trouble, who've had loved ones in the hospital that with maybe Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia, and they're concerned. They can't get there and be the advocate for them and care for them. And in long-term care facilities, so much heartbreak. And we understand the dilemma. Obviously, we want to keep those folks safe. We understand that they're our most vulnerable population. So it's a very difficult area, and yet it's the most heartbreaking thing I think I've encountered during this last year from constituents who call me and say, I have not seen my loved one since March, and they're alone. They don't understand. I'm waving at them through a window. They keep saying, why don't you come in here? Don't you love me anymore? The heartbreak has just been so tough. And so I want to commend the main sponsor on this is Julie Mayberry, and she has done, I can't imagine the weeks of hours, because it's not hours anymore. I mean, it's got to have translated into, I don't know how many weeks of her life she has given over to this bill, because she has really worked. And I want to commend the folks on the other side, the Hospital Association, they're all working together to try to come up with the best bill that we can to ensure safety, but recognize that these, whether it's minor children, this bill touches all different scenarios with regard to minor children, with regard to folks in long-term care facilities, with regard to hospice care, with regard to just going to medical appointments, to make sure that we have do everything we can, that we don't have people there alone, that they've got someone there to advocate for them, that they've got somebody there to, that we're getting people in facilities to actually have personal contact with them when possible. And there are safeguards in this to, like I said, to ensure safety and recognize different, and it's very involved, but with regard to looking into the counties, what, are we at 10% or below, looking at how many long-term care facilities, looking at how long we've been before we've had a positive case in there, that kind of, since we've had a positive case, different things, but recognizing we've got to get people in there, and we need them in clergy care, also the clergy. Get people in there as much as we can face to face. And so it made it out of the House committee. It will be on the House floor, as you mentioned, on Monday. There's widespread support for this. People, I'm not the only person throughout the state. We've heard from our constituents, and they're the most heartbreaking calls. And so all across the board, people are working to advance this. Yeah, there may be a few more changes that need to be made, perhaps on the Senate side. But I think we're close to there. The bill that we've got, I think, will be pretty close to what we see as the finished product. I believe it will pass, and I believe this will be an area of celebration for a lot of folks in Arkansas.
All right, thanks. That's a pretty good description, and I hope it does pass, because I do have a personal interest in that bill, because I have a family member that has been diagnosed with dementia, and will probably be going into a facility to live, the rest of her life on that. So any little bit helps on that. So thank you for helping out on that issue and supporting that issue. And I think it's an important one that we need to address. Let's see. One of the other things, Kayla, I'm going to pick on you all day because you're the only elected official on the call.
By default, here I go.
But the Another one on the calendar for Monday, Austin McCollum has, and this goes along the lines with the bill you just talked about. Austin McCollum has sponsored a bill that basically codifies the executive orders to deal with the COVID for the healthcare providers. There are some, there was news this week. The governor has lifted some of the restrictions. If we stay, on a good path by March 31st, we may be able to get some of those restrictions lifted that we've been doing. But there are issues that remain with having to deal with this under an emergency and for healthcare providers on COVID. Share, if you can, share some of your thoughts on 1521 on that. What do you think on that bill?
Well, sure. With regard to 1521 and a lot of these bills that we have that are, they're all married to each other, so to speak, as far as we're in this situation where we've got to get the protections in place, whether with the emergency order. Of course, now it looks like the declaration is going to expire here the 31st with the mask mandate and some other things. There's so much in here that I've heard from constituents. Probably the number one, there are three big issues we've heard throughout this entire year with regard to unemployment claims and the problems folks have had with that, with regard to long-term care and the hospitals with the separation with loved ones. And I would say the third one I've heard from people is with regard to the entire, everything that goes under the umbrella with the directives and the guidelines and the state of emergency, all of these things and how it's handled. So with regard to all of these, I know that there are a lot of bills out there trying to address the different directives and guidelines. And of course, we've got the issue as well with the liability protection. So the concern is getting things in place to make sure we have the protections, because what I explained to folks when they called me in the very beginning with regard to the state of emergency, and I think now a lot of people have become experts on this, a directive and a guideline. The directive, when you change a directive to a guideline, as you know, for the liability protections, it's almost the same thing still as a directive, because if you want the liability protection, you need to be following the guidelines. So I'm giving a general answer as far as to all of these is that we need to make sure we're looking to get once an emergency declaration expires, then all those directives and those protections also expire with it. And so getting all these different things in line for whatever avenue we take for the next 30 days and beyond, to make sure we have the protections we need for the folks, the liability protections in all of these areas. So that's a broader answer, but what I'm finding is what I'm hearing from people all across the board. What are you doing with this, and really they are all connected.
Thank you. Well, as far as the session goes, we're about a little over halfway through. I think we'll probably get done probably second week of April. I guess it's been reported. What's your feeling, Gayla, on the issue or on the session so far? How's it going? What's the mood down there? It's an uncommon session because of the way we're having to deal with the COVID and impact on how we interact down there. Just kind of some general kind of your take on what do you see coming up? How's it been? Just
Sure.
Thoughts in general on.
Sure. And if I could mention, I am on the education committee. So Bart Hester's bill that you mentioned, I did want to commend a Marshall Lee student came and testified in support of that. I can't remember what she got her ACT at 34. She did a phenomenal job. She with her family, just so proud of her. And I want to commend her. I ran into her about 5 or 6 times throughout the day. She was able to go and with her parents and get a tour and get a good flavor, get a feel of what goes on with the legislature. And I visited with her a number of different times. And so I'm excited to see that the doors open for this young lady. She just is, she's done a lot of hard work, and I'm happy to see that this scholarship, I believe, is probably going to advance and that this will be able to help her. With regard to the session, I say the same thing. Of course, I'm just into my second session, but I run across people. I ran across a lady in the Capitol on Thursday after a meeting heading to session. And we had the same conversation I have over and over and over again. we do things too quickly here. And you mentioned, of course, Jim Dotson with the bill there before the public health. Getting it right the first time, it really impacts people's lives so much, as we know that. Now, that's what we're doing here. Any bill, and if it's not impacting someone's life, I don't know why we're doing it. But we impact people's lives, and too many things go through too quickly, and there's just too much to absorb. There, you can spend, as you know, with one bill that's getting a lot of attention. I spent probably a 45-minute phone call with a constituent yesterday, just explaining the stand your ground bill before and after and all those different things. And I'm glad to do that. That's what we need to do. And there's a lot of confusion on that. And so one bill can take a lot of your time, or 2 or 3 bills, and yet you're going to be between committee and the House floor. You may be voting on 40 bills that day, and it will get even more extensive as we go along. A lot to go, a lot to do. And people don't get, as soon as a bill gets out of committee, we're voting for, and some of these committees end at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30. We're voting on it the next day on the House floor. Often we can. And there's just no time for not enough time for constituent input. And that was their frustration. I said, this is my frustration. I said, oftentimes I'll get an email about a bill 2 days after we voted on it, because by the time it gets out to the general public, and the struggle is, yes, you can send all these bills out to folks before they get to committee. They get filed maybe 2 or 3 weeks before they're presented to committee. But as you all know, a lot of those bills may never be presented in committee, or they may be worked over so much. They get them filed, then they work them over so much before they actually come and present them to committee, oftentimes with amendments that day. And so if you it's too much for people to try to absorb. Some of these pages, the bill's 20 pages long. You can't just say, hey folks, here's the next, these 100 bills will be presented tomorrow in these different committees. Or, 3 weeks in advance, give them a heads up, because they spend all their time reading. That's hard for them to read. And then they don't end up being presented. All that to say is, I don't know what we need to change. I would recommend at best, I think we need a longer wait period after a bill passes committee before it makes it to the House floor, because then we know it's passed committee, has a reasonably good chance of passing. It needs to get in front of folks so they can absorb it and give input to their representatives or their senators, because that's how I think we have better legislation. So that's a long answer for, I think, is one of our biggest problems and complaints I hear from constituents is, I didn't even know this was before me. I will be up at 2 o'clock in the morning reading a bill that I see is going to be on the House floor the next day. I'm thinking, boy, I've got to reach out to so-and-so on this and so-and-so. It impacts their job. But I can't call them at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be at committee in the morning. And then if I do get a hold of them, they're in the middle of their job that day. They they break from their job and absorb that bill. I get a chance to mull it over. So that is that's my thing. I say that to everybody. I think we need to look at changing the rules, maybe to give at least one more extra day between committee and voting on the floor. I guess as far as the atmosphere, yes, it's very odd as far as trying to the communication, just even trying to have a communication with your colleagues. You can't hear so well through the masks. And of course, there's the barrier trying to get the personal interaction with your constituents when you come back home, because there aren't those same public forums as we see here that people had where they could come up to you and really give you their thoughts and interact with you. So it's much more difficult. I'm relying a lot more on phone calls, emails, social media, but a lot of people don't have social media. And so, and good for them. And so I think it's a little more challenging. And of course, you all do a good job letting people know in advance, but oftentimes too, by the time something gets to the paper, it may be too late for them to reach out to us and let us know their thoughts on it. So that's my thought of one thing I think that we could improve. But all in all, I think that people are doing a good job up there trying to work hard to get their constituent input when they can.
Well, thank you. You're doing a great job down there, and we appreciate everything that you do. 99.9% of your colleagues down there are down there for the right reasons and trying to do the best they can, the way they see fit, for their districts. And so we just applaud you and thank you for being there and being responsive. So as far as being responsive, I don't know if we got any questions from anybody. You can send me one in the chat function, or you can just go ahead and ask to unmute, and we'll go ahead and ask. But while we're waiting on that, I'm going to pick on Dickie Ray Trammell. We're going to go a little bit on national issues here. I want to hear your thoughts on, there's a lot of talk about infrastructure package coming up. Dick, you're the former highway commissioner. You used to be somebody, but share some of your thoughts on that. What are our needs in Arkansas that need to be highlighted or be included in a infrastructure package if one ever comes about on a national level?
Well, thanks, John. And like I said, I'm a has-been, but I spent a little time trying to develop highways in Arkansas. I think that number one thing is that we have to stress highway maintenance. Rural highways in Arkansas, rural highways are very important to us. Agriculture is still one of our number one industries, and the people of Arkansas stepped up when they extended the half-cent tax, because that'll make a big difference. And here in Northwest Arkansas, we've been very fortunate. During the 10 years that I had to serve, my other commissioners understood our problems, and they were really good to us. I'm excited that the Highway Department is working with the XNA, because before they were doing separate things, and now they're working together, and Philip's doing a good job as the commissioner for us. So, but infrastructure, not only in Arkansas, but my friends who travel around the country say that our interstate system is really in a mess as far as maintenance. So it's kind of like if you got a farm and you level it, it'll do better. Well, you got to maintain it though. So I am saying that if we don't do something, our interstates are going to crumble, and our bridge systems and that kind of thing are, we've seen a couple of bridges cave in, even one in Arkansas. So I'm just saying a highway bill is important. A highway bill should take into consideration traffic. Number one, traffic safety is the job of a highway commission or any highway department, is traffic safety. So, but we during my time on the commission, we realized that we were trying to take care of the traffic, but now in Arkansas, we need to look at rural roads, rural highways. And a good example is, like, I'm glad that 112 is going to be looked at, and it's going to be kind of like 265. And our people are doing a good job, and I am pleased. But infrastructure in this country needs repairs, and I think that's very important. So that's just my opinion, but after all the experiences and what I know, let's support improvements and maintenance of the highways that we have. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dickie Ray. It is important. It is important for the economy. It's important for safety, as you mentioned. It's important for a lot of reasons that we, have a good focus on infrastructure improvements and enhancements across the country. So anyway, thank you, Dickie Ray, for your service on the Highway Commission. And thank you, Gayla, for everything that you've been doing, for your responsiveness. We enjoy visiting with you. I always used to joke about, I think I told your dad one time, I would love to be a fly on the wall at a Hutchinson Hendren family get together. You're gonna, a great debate's going to either break out or a street fight, either one, So, I mean, your family has been so instrumental in public policy in the last 30 or 40 years in this state. A lot of people don't remember your dad ran for governor back in 1982.
I think so. Yeah.
And he was a Democrat back then, and then he switched to Republican, and he has been a very good representative, and has represented the Republican Party well, and you do too. But I mean, it's just a commentary on our society, you know, how it should be. Even in one family, you have differing political opinions. And I know your brother's made some news with his switch this past week or so to being an independent. You know, we do have some issues to work on in this country. And I think the bulk of the issues are going to be solved by when people get together and not from the extremes, but, you know, more in the middle. That's how we're going to get things done. And so we just really do appreciate you for coming on and being responsive. I know Hendrens and Hutchinsons aren't afraid of very much at all. So, I mean, you're not afraid to be responsive to your constituents. And I wish your brother was here today, but he's got grandkid duty in Oklahoma City, and we exchanged texts a little bit this morning. So, and you know, I just want to wish him the best of luck on his whatever he decides to do with his endeavors in the future. But he has also been a really, really good representative as well of his constituents, and I just admire you and your family because of their public service, and I hope you keep doing what you're doing. I'm not always going to agree with you 100% policy-wise or political-wise, but I respect you for doing it, and I'm glad you're doing it. And it's not easy to do, to leave your family, leave your home, and to go down to Little Rock and deal with a bunch of COVID issues this time around, and you know, get people yelling at you and calling you all times of the night, and or you'll get more complaints than you do, you know, atta-girls or atta-boys. And so I wanted to take today to kind of, you know, go over those. You know, we're not always complaining about things y'all do. We actually want to highlight some of the things y'all do. You know.
Well, you know, my dad and Representative Walker, John Walker, they served together and were the closest of friends. And yet they pretty much split their votes more often than not. Mm-hmm. But I always knew about Representative Walker and my dad's friendship, and was familiar with him, watched him quite a bit on the session, whether in live or remotely here from Gravett. And I had the privilege of serving with him in his last session, in the 2019 session. And I remember whenever he would rise to speak, we still probably split our votes more often than not. But that's somebody I always wanted to hear from. I knew whatever he was going to say, it was going to be of value. It was going to be thoughtful. There was not going to be exaggeration. You know, if you have a point to make, you should be able to make it without having to exaggerate. Just tell the folks the facts and be truthful. And that's what I always appreciated about him. And so with regard to our family, we're going to have differing of opinions. Obviously, we all kind of chart the course that we believe is right, and I try to look at constituent input. But people joked about Jim and about sometimes that Jim and I might have split votes last session or this session. That certainly happened plenty, but we didn't allow it to split ourselves. And so there was always, and with Dad and Jim too, there were times maybe when Dad would speak against my brother's bill. It never hurt the relationship, and that's how it should be across the board. What we try to do is people matter, principles matter. And you can have both. You can have relationships in your life and have differing opinions. And in the practical world, I think people realize that people have family members have all kinds of different views. You shouldn't allow it to split your family. And I have friends from all across the spectrum. We haven't had those dynamics have not changed. So even though we see on social media a lot of ugly, a lot of things that just probably would be better, just don't post, just don't comment, just move on. But in our personal lives, I'm happy to see that I've not seen a lot of that, as far as the folks that maybe disagree with me on every single vote are still my friends. And we have not seen our relationship, you know, damaged through that. And so I hope that we can see more of that. And obviously I wish Jim the best. People ask me, are you still a Republican? Yes, I am. I support the Republican Party platform, and that's where I feel at home. But I believe that we need to have a great relationship no matter what anybody else's affiliation or party is, and work the best, because most of these bills don't even have to do with a lot of those issues that are separating us. We just need to get them as best we can to work to get them right. And I find up there that we still have in committee meetings, whether it's a Democrat or Republican or what the party affiliation, those questions generally are just trying to get at what can we do to find if there's an issue with this bill that we need to fix here in committee. So that's at least some good news in the middle of all the bad news sometimes we hear.
Yeah. Well, I can't say it enough. I just want to thank you for what the job you're doing. And I'll never criticize you for any vote that you make, because I know that you've weighed in on the issue and really thought about it. You know, I may not disagree with the vote you make sometimes, but you know what I'm saying. I just appreciate you for for your service. And so, but anyway, so if anybody's got any questions, Dougie, do you have anything for Gayla that you want to ask her? Nope, you're muted.
No, but thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. So, well, maybe Dougie will find something to write about and pull out of this discussion today. But and then I just appreciate, it's been a hard session. It's not been easy, and so we're working on it the best we can to get things done. Graham, you're one of the co-hosts here. Did you have any comment or question or anything like that you want to leave folks with?
I'll just reiterate the gratitude that we have for the leadership. Folks that understand they need to look at all sides, they need to be true to their word. And, what Representative Dotson did and in making sure that he was still remaining true to his word and serving Northwest Arkansas by making sure that he was an efficient steward of funding down the road and saving taxpayers money when it comes to getting things right now and not later in the courts. I think was brave and right. And I'm proud to be in Northwest Arkansas and see the work that our representatives are doing. So Gayla, thank you very much. And please let others know that we feel that way.
All right. Thanks, Graham.
John,
Yeah, Dickie Ray.
John, I just want Gayla to know that I took her dad to Eastern Arkansas when he ran for governor as a Democrat, and I've been a fan ever since. I don't care what party he's involved in. I appreciate your dad and I appreciate your family, but I had a lot of fun taking Mr. Hendren over to East Arkansas running for governor.
Absolutely. We could really add some spice in here if I could get Dad. I don't know if he does Zoom, but wouldn't he be a character if I could get him to come to one of these meetings?
Invite him the next time. I haven't heard a sermon from your dad in a long time. I used to enjoy those,
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're watching a committee meeting and he'd raise his hand and get recognized and I'd be like, here we go, here. And so you never knew what he was going to say, but it was going to be good, Mm-hmm. So he always raised some pretty good points. So, so it's I miss him a lot. I miss that dialogue. I miss that back and forth that he brought to the state. And when you see him, I know he's had some health issues here lately. When you see him, tell him we miss him, and he's more than welcome to dial in and preach if he wants to. We'll be happy to have him on here. So
I'll tell him. Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, it doesn't look like we got any more questions. And like I always say, you're never going to get in trouble for finishing early on a meeting. So, I just appreciate everybody that's on here, and the chambers are available for y'all. If you have any questions about any bills or anything going on, we'll do our best to get the information to you, our stance, and hear your thoughts on it, and share them with Gayla and her colleagues. So just keep in touch with us. You can always email me or call me at any time. And I know Gayla also is very open to, being contacted by y'all. So, yeah, Dougie.
Sorry for being tardy, but I did think of a question I need to ask.
Go ahead.
Gayla, you mentioned that at one point in this, you mentioned that other bills may be getting more attention, but the ones you received most calls on are things like your being able to live with loved ones bill. You also mentioned unemployment claims being one thing you get a lot of calls on. Look, I think I know what you're talking about. I am familiar with the issue. Would you make explicitly clear what the top concern on that is that you're getting?
With regard to are you asking with regard to the constituents calling me about the unemployment claims? Yes.
Exactly.
As we all know, the system was never, as I say, designed for this. And since March, that's been, I can't, none of us could begin to count how many calls we've gotten on that. And it has been an ebb and flow as far as there'll be a big backlog, and then they'll kind of, it'll cut loose there for a little bit, and then we'll have a backlog again. And right now the backlog is really in the appeals process. I believe they're back was August. I think maybe they're now handling claims and claims that have been denied, and now we're in the appellate process for claims back in October. And so a big problem I'm hearing from folks is some of our offices here locally that the wait times, they may go and wait all day and have to come back the next day and then line. And so many issues, and people will reach out to me individually, and I'll do my very best to help those folks individually. But I also understand that there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to contact or don't realize they can reach out to the representative. And so when I reach out, I suppose on a daily basis, I know it is, for different folks with issues, we're also trying to, I'm trying to relay, look, we also have, this problem here or this problem here that's affecting a widespread, a lot of people here. They're aware of that. Now, sometimes they won't be, and it's also helpful to say, I realize you may be aware of this, but I'm going to pass this on again in case you didn't realize that there's this amount of wait time for people in this such and such office here. So they're working on that. I know the snow was another big delay we had recently. The ice storm was a big problem. So delays were even then, backlogged even more. And they tell me, of course, I understand that you, yes, hire more help, but especially with regard to the appellate process, they have to obviously be seasoned. They have to have an understanding. So you just can't plug people in there that not worked there before and don't have the wealth of knowledge. But it is a problem. And I hope, we keep hoping as we're getting, hopefully winding down with things, with closures, things opening back up again, and with the vaccine distribution, I'm hoping we're at our last backlog. Again, the appellate process is going to continue to lag a little bit, but they are aware of that, obviously, and they're working to try to help him.
Okay, so basically it's just the overloading of the system.
Yes, the overloading, the confusion. I've heard from people, of course, that, the confusion and where it is, as far as I'll be told to do this one thing. I go to the office, stand in line all day and told, no, you're not supposed to do this. You need to go back and do that. And I understand the frustration. I understand it. And so it's an overloading, it's a miscommunication sometimes, and it's the frustration is great.
Thank you.
Right. Well, I want to thank our sponsors for their support of this program. Some of them have been around with us for a long time. We co-host this with the greater area of Bentonville Commerce. But also our sponsors are Visit Bentonville and Visit Rogers, Walmart, AEP SWEPCO, AT&T, Black Hills Energy, and the State Chamber of Commerce. So we thank them for their ongoing support so we can do programs like this that are a public service. And thank you, Gayla, once again. And I'll finish with just a personal thought, and I also want to thank you again for your bill, particularly with regards to the mental health aspect of the bill that you're running. It means a lot to me. When my mom died a couple of years ago, and she was just as political as my dad, and she took me to Washington, D.C. one time when I was about 12 years old, and made me wear a suit, and it was about 180 degrees in Washington, D.C. that day. And you used to be able to eat in the Senate dining room back then. And, senators would bring constituents in to sit at a table, and they'd have about a few seats that they would bring them in. But it was usually senators and staff that were sitting at these tables. And I remember it distinctly because just a couple tables over was Bob Dole. It was his table. And, he when Bob Dole walked by, Dale Bumpers said, "Hey, Bob, come here and meet some folks from Arkansas." And, he exchanged niceties with us and complimented me on wearing a tie and how hot it was outside that day. And he was a Republican and he ran for president. And so, but he was a, very principled Republican as well. And, him and Dale Bumpers didn't agree on everything, but they worked together. And the other person that came by the table was Senator Joe Biden. And same thing, Dale said, meet some folks from Arkansas. And Joe Biden, came over to me and started asking me questions, that you would ask any constituent's kid. Where do you go to school? How old are you? You look good today. What are y'all going to be doing in D.C. today? And so I got home from that trip and I told my dad, I said, I like Joe Biden. He's one of my favorite senators. He needs to be president someday. And he is now the president of the United States. And in 2008 on election night, when he was elected vice president, my dad called. He remembered that story. And he said, well, your favorite senator is now the vice president, is going to be the vice president of the United States. And got one more step to go. Maybe he'll make it someday. But I think that speaks to the way our society is today as far as politics goes. We need to get back to that, to where Republicans and Democrats can say, hey, just come meet some people that, and let's talk to them. And, but I just thought of that story, this week because, but anyway, I think we need to get back to that again. And Gayla, you're a good representative of how we can get back to that time and that sentiment in American politics and local politics. I just appreciate everything you do. And thank you for being on here.
Thank you for having me.
But with that, I'll leave y'all and we'll get done about 13 minutes early. So go enjoy your kids or whatever you got to get done today, Gayla. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks or as long as, I think we've got one. I can't remember what, but in 2 weeks, we've got another one if it doesn't bump up against spring break. So thank you all for being here. And if y'all have any questions, you feel free to contact me or you can contact Gayla. She's very willing to talk to you. So thank y'all and y'all have a good weekend. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
All right.
See you all.
Is that good?
Thanks, John. Appreciate you, bud. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Dickie Ray.